ordinance, you can regulate the location of the sexually oriented businesses. And that's essentially what you're doing here. I mean, the meat of this provision is you're saying that they cannot locate within 1,000 feet of a church, a school, a child care facility, a boundary of a residential district, a public park, property line of a lot devoted to residential use, any building or structure where alcoholic beverages are offered for sale, or another sexually oriented business. I mean, that's the meat of what you're adding. And you're adding a number of definitions in here just so that we we have the baseline to go by when, assuming someone comes in and makes an application. Okay, there's a second step, which actually I'm going to leave you the copy today. It's not on your agenda, but is if a sexually oriented business were still to locate here, then you regulate the operation of it. Essentially, you call for the licensing of it. There are a few. You can make this different levels of regulations. Okay. I try not to go too far out on untested waters because you don't really want to stick your neck out too far. I went through and looked through the San Antonio ordinance, and San Antonio has probably been one of the more aggressive cities within the state in regulating sexually oriented businesses. But they've also been involved in 3 different lawsuits in the last 2 or 3 years. But they can afford to do that. So essentially, we're calling for the licensing of it, the oversight of it. One thing that we have put in is also not only licensing the operators, owners and operators of it, but also the managers of it, and requiring things that managers be on duty, be there, someone in charge at all times, and of course, having the process for fining the establishment in the event they don't follow the regulations. So that's essentially it.
And that would, in the event this were to take place, would go through municipal court?
Yes, any violations of it, yes.
Any violations would go through?
This goes through, your planning, basically. Mm-hmm. The first step, someone's going to have to come in and say, okay, I want to locate such and such place. And we start looking at, well, is that available? And again, the distances and some of the ordinance are a little bit even stricter, but not stricter, more encompassing. You got to be a certain distance from a number of different things. But I've tried to keep it on well-established, long accepted regulations, which hopefully
stand the test of time.
Have stood the test of time, and you don't make yourself a target, because cities, can make yourself a target. If you pass something, I don't know, I've had several people ask me, maybe not here, it's like, well, can't we just pass an ordinance to ban them? I'm like, well, no, you can't. And if you did, I think you'd be opening yourselves to a challenge, and if for no other reason, just so that an attorney can challenge it and have you pay his attorney's fees.
Is 1,000 feet the norm?
Well, that is a fairly well-established, acceptable distance. There are other ordinances out there that have extended it further. But the 1,000 feet has been something that's been around and accepted for 15 plus years. So, and you can't, when you stop and think about the city, there may be locations within the city that are more than 1,000 feet. There probably are somewhere. But
that almost has to be an ideal spot for them.
You would think that you could. Your zoning is to keep them away from certain places in town, again, it's a pretty accepted distance. But I have seen I've seen, cities that have gone up, maybe they might take 3,000 feet from a church. But, that's also a town like, a town like San Antonio. Well, there's a lot of places 3,000 feet away from a church.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And also that we were given everything that we asked, that requested to examine. If you look in that second paragraph on page 1, it says, we conducted our audit in accordance with auditing standards generally accepted in the United States of America. What that means is we have rules and procedures which we must follow when performing an audit. We're stating here we follow those rules and procedures. That third paragraph, first sentence, says, in our opinion, these financial statements present fairly in all material respects the financial position of the city of Falls City, Texas, as of September 30, 2011, and for the year that ends. So it's a good, clean, unqualified opinion. Next, I would ask you to please turn to page 16 in the report. Page 16 is a bird's eye view of the general fund. Last year, if you go down that first column, 3 lines from the bottom, it says net changes in fund balance. Your fund balance increased by $27,700. You go down 1 line, you had a beginning fund balance of $208,000. That gave you an ending fund balance of $236,000. Compare that ending fund balance with your expenditures last year of $180,000. You have more than enough to cover 1 year's worth of expenses. Probably about a year and 4 months worth of coverage of your expenses. Next, if you would, let's turn over to page number 19 and 20 in the report. On page 19 and 20 is your utility fund, your balance sheet. On page 19 are your assets, and page 20 is your liabilities and equity. Excuse me. There's 3 columns. That first column is what your utility fund looked like at September 30, 2011. That second column is what it looked like at September 30, 2010. So you kind of compare the 2 years. If you look on page 20 in that first column at the bottom, 1 line from the bottom, your unrestricted equity at the end of the year was $122,547 compared with $145,941 the previous year. So it went down about $22,000, $23,000. Still is a good equity. And your current ratio is your current assets over your current liabilities. If you ever get any debt whatsoever, look at your current ratio for sure. If you look at your current assets, that would be in that first column on page 19 at the top. It's $149,782. You divide that by your total current liabilities, which is in that first column on page 20 at the top, of $33,911. So you have a coverage of about 4.5 to 1, close to 5 to 1 coverage of your current ratio. So anything over 1.5 to 1 or higher is considered very good. So your current ratio is good. And then on page 21 is your income statement last year. Again, there's 3 columns. That first column is your income statement this year under audit. The second column is your income expenses for the previous year. You kind of compare the 2 years. Looking in the middle of that page versus operating income loss, this is the only thing that's troubling to me, is last year you had a $47,382 loss from operations. The previous year you had a $71,950 loss from operations. And that's kind of even though your loss decreased from 1 year to the next, you are showing a loss from operations. That would be your income less your expenses, including depreciation. So somewhere along the line you may want to consider going up on your utility rates. And definitely if you go out and want to get some debt, I don't know, you use Southwest Securities, you use anybody at all, they're gonna look at that. That's the number they're gonna look at. So I just talked about. If you look at the very top, by page 21, where it says total operating revenues, your total revenues went from $240,000 to $270,000, so they went up by $30,000. Probably I would guess because they had a drop that year. And then under your total operating expenses in the middle of the page, they went up from 312,000 to 318,000. So they,
Byron, were you figuring that
6,000.
loss like that? Is that, you said depreciation assets too, correct?
Yeah, depreciation is calculated in that.
But we're getting the grants too, that are like $250,000 a year.
Yes. As long as you get grants, that's not a problem.
Okay.
But, people that don't get grants, those are a big problem. Because basically, that money is there to replenish your infrastructure. That's why you calculate depreciation.
And we didn't buy any new machinery,
No.
it just depreciated.
Yeah, just like water lines and things like that, sewer lines.
So we're getting those grants every year.
Yeah, you're upgrading the system,
Yeah,
so
exactly.
its value is increasing.
Okay. The other thing I want to point out is on page, one thing negative I can see is your operating loss. If you look on page 37 at towards the top there, you have a notes payable that's close to the year 2018, but it's only $39,000. So basically, you have little or no debt in the city, hardly any debt at all. So that's about it on the report itself. On the inserts, these two inserts, the one that is a one-page insert, the management letter, basically the first one, utilities. We did a systems conversion, and apparently the new system was not calculating your late fees correctly. I think that's been corrected. Municipal court, we would recommend they're using, like, we call them generic receipt books. They're kind of like dime store receipt books, whatever you want to call them. And we would just recommend that the city, Lauren especially, acquire kind of official looking receipt books and log them out to the municipal court. And basically these receipt books would have the name of the city, municipal court, and most importantly they'll be in numerical order. So that's a recommendation there. The other letter on page 1, segregation of duties. Same thing every year until they change the standards I referred to at the very beginning. The standards now do not make any distinction between a small city and a large city. Of course, they're looking for people to perform all these different tasks in your bookkeeping function. For instance, getting the mail, opening the mail, listing the mail, taking the money to the bank, reconciling the bank account, doing the accounting, and so on and so forth. Of course, it would be cost prohibitive for City of Falls City to do that. So, but we have to write it up. And then page 2 under your financial statement preparation, same thing. What they're looking for is an in-house CPA to turn it up your audit report. Of course, that's impractical.
We've got one, but that's combining too many duties.
So we're just stating here we wrote up the audit report.
So acquiring debt is good or bad for the city?
That's a management decision.
How does it look in the books?
That's still a management decision. It's in and out. I mean, it's cash in, cash out.
You're not recommending that we change much of what we're doing here right now, other than some minor details in.
I'd recommend considering going up in your utility fees. Other than that, I wouldn't change anything.
You don't live here, do you?
No.
But it isn't
I'd like to.
But it isn't as pleasant than a raise their utility.
I'll switch places.
Well, if you benchmark us against other small towns of our size,
I think probably I would say in the 70%, 75% percentile. I think y'all do real well, actually.